Open your eyes to the world all around you. Open your eyes, open your eyes. This world is much more than the things that surround you.
Hi, I'm Pastor Brett Glover, and welcome to our first video in setting up our children for blessing. In this first week, we're going to have two videos that will come to you. The first one is about what does blessing really mean. That's a foundational video. And the second video will be about instilling a God esteem, not a self-esteem in our kids. So that's important to realize. So as we go forward, we need to ask the question, and our first video is, what does Jesus really mean in the Beatitudes when he says, blessed? What does he really mean? When he said, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now that's sometimes pretty hard to understand, and we need to work our way through some of this stuff. Firstly, we need to look at some of the language and some of the historical background to the word blessing to help us understand what it actually means. So firstly, in English, the word blessed is translated often as happy. In many Bible translations, that's a very poor translation. It's something that doesn't really relay some of the history behind the word blessed and what it actually means. In the Greek word is makarios, which is used from the Koine Greek, which is the language that the Gospel of Matthew was written in. It's used over and over again as the word for blessing, makarios. Now that basically means the favour of the gods, or above the cares of this world. So it basically gives you a feel that it's a very much a Hellenistic word, a word that's not part of the history of Christian thought, but it's a borrowed word. But we know that in Matthew's Gospel that Jesus spoke in Aramaic, and Matthew's Gospel is actually written in Greek. So the word behind that Jesus may have used, there's probably two words that would have been behind that in the Aramaic, with the Aramaic Hebrew type background. And it's important to think in these terms so we can understand what blessing actually means. You see, the first word that I'd like to pinpoint is barak. Barak is a word that is a Hebrew word, or barik, which is the Aramaic version, which are very similar meanings that come through. Now, when we're looking at that word barak, it basically means to kneel, to stoop down to kneel, to give a gift, or to drink from a pond. That's the idea that it's related. It's an old word that goes way back in the Bible, and it's some of the earliest terms for blessing. It's the word that's used mostly in Genesis, and it does relay the idea of being in relationship, kneeling before God, having the lordship of God, and the blessing comes out of that relationship. So it's important to understand that it's not a word that's devoid of relationship at all. It's not like our idea of happy, that it can be just a lucky series of events. It's very different to that in the Hebrew mind. It's based on the idea that you're in relationship with God. If we get a feel for it, like in Deuteronomy 11:26, see, I'm setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you listen to the commands of the Lord your God, which I am commanding you today. The idea behind this idea of blessing is that when we're in this relationship with God, blessings follow. It's a natural response. All through Genesis, the word barak is used. It's used in the beginning in the creation narrative. It says this in Genesis chapter 1, 27 and 28. So God created human beings, making them to be like himself. He created them male and female, blessed them, and said, have many children, so that your descendants will live all over the earth, and bring it under the control. I am putting you in charge of the fish, of the birds, and the wild animals. The idea of barak runs behind that when we kneel before God, that blessing comes to us. That blessing comes from God, and it's a gift of God that comes through to us as a blessing. That's out of that relationship with God, being in constant relationship there. We can see this also in the Abrahamic blessing where Abraham was blessed. The word is used all the time through there, barak, using to bless Abraham. Now we get the idea that Abraham's knee bows before the Lord and he is blessed because of his relationship with God, that God would make his descendants as multiple as the stars in the sky. All those sort of things carry through with the idea of barak. It's wrapped up in the idea of covenant relationship. When we're in a relationship with God, God will bless us. And that's where it comes from. Where the word happy is totally inadequate. It has more to do with luck and has more of a Viking background from the Nordic side of things. But anyhow, that's part of where we're heading. The other word that we need to look at, which is used, and it's used often, is ensure. Sometimes meaning to be helped by God, or in a relationship with God, or God that helps in a relationship with God, or something of that notion. The blessing that comes out of that relationship, that connected knowledge of God, is a blessing. And that's used many times through the Psalms. We pick that up, like in Psalm 1, chapter 1 to 4. Happy are those, ensure, are those who reject the advice of evil people, who do not follow the example of sinners, or join in those who have no use for God. Instead, they find joy in obeying the law of the Lord, and they study it day and night. They are like trees that are grown beside a stream, that bear fruit at the right time, and whose leaves do not dry up. They succeed in everything they do. The ensure comes behind that God is their help. God is at the foundation. It's all about relationship. So as we move through, we will see and think about what Jesus does actually mean here is that it's not about luck. It's not about simply an emotional feeling, even though there is real positive feelings associated with that. It's blessing that comes out of relationship with God. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. So it's the key to understanding the Beatitudes. When we understand what Jesus is talking about and the old Hebrew ideals that run through the Beatitudes, you will see clearly the blessings that God has and where they're coming from. And they're all based out of that relationship. Now, let us get it clear. This blessing is not something like a Tony Robbins blessing. It's not a success formula. It's not something that we need to do. It's not based on our own self-esteem. It is based upon God's relationship with you and your children. It is not a selfish treasure hunt. And I'll be referring back to this idea of blessing all the way through the series about how we are blessed because we're in relationship to God, that God is our helper, that when our knee bends before the Lord, there is a blessing that comes and a gift that comes from God. So this will be referred to time and again as we move through. So in the series of setting your kids up for blessing, you'll be seeing 8 characteristics that you would hope to see in your child's life that will set them up to move forward to be blessed. So please, I welcome you on this journey. This is the first stage, the first video. There'll be another one coming out this week to join this one. The second part of that, instilling a God esteem, not a self-esteem in your children. This is a very different approach and a very different understanding to how to equip your kids to move ahead with confidence. So look forward to seeing you in the next video. God bless you and see you soon.
Open your eyes to the world all around you. Open your eyes. This world is